Pardon Paul Manafort?
I have not even given it a thought as of this moment. It's not something that's right now in my mind. I do feel badly for Paul Manafort.
A big question for President Trump has been whether he would pardon his aides in the Mueller probe, like Manafort, until tonight. That question, in a very real sense, may have been taken off the table as New York prosecutors are aiming to checkmate President Trump with these new pardon-proof charges indicting Paul Manafort in New York on these 16 counts. Now, you've heard us mention this before in our reporting, and it's a big deal tonight. It cannot really be stressed enough. This is the nightmare that Trump's lawyers have always presumably warned him about, that these new New York charges tonight that go after Paul Manafort in ways that Donald Trump cannot legally pardon. So if convicted, and we just saw how much evidence there could be to use against Manafort, then Trump couldn't really save him from a lot of jail time. Now, that's huge, because as you know, if you follow the news, the looming question in the entire endgame of the Mueller probe is why the former chair of Trump's campaign, Paul Manafort, kept lying after pleading guilty. It didn't seem like something you would do to protect yourself. So who was he protecting? And why did he keep parroting no collusion? Now, if you watch this show, you know we first reported on this all the way back in August 2017 when we wrote and reported on The Beat about the ways that state AGs could investigate these cases, and if they found charges, that would be an end run around a federal pardon. Take a look. This was 2017. Tonight, for the first time, we can report new findings from an MSNBC legal unit investigation into the other way this Russia probe could continue even after pardons, through prosecution for state crimes. A source with knowledge of one general's preparations tells me. I think we might re-rack that because this is pretty important. Do we have the ending part of that? We're going to see about re-racking that. Basically, this was August 2017. Mueller had been in office a few months, and we reported for the first time then, over a year ago, that there was a state looking at this way of charging that would go around Donald Trump as a person who controls federal pardons. Let's take a look. Tonight, for the first time, we can report new findings from an MSNBC legal unit investigation into the other way this Russia probe could continue even after pardons, through prosecution for state crimes. A source with knowledge of one state attorney general's preparations tells me that office is already looking at its potential jurisdiction for Russia-related crimes. And now we knew. That's what we knew in 2017, and now we know no pardon can save Manafort in New York. I am very excited to tell you about our exclusive guest on this topic. Dan Alonso was the former chief assistant district attorney for Manhattan under, yes, Cy Vance, the DA who filed these bombshell charges today. Dan was Vance's right-hand man, or if you're a Law and Order fan, we could say he was the Jack McCoy to Vance's Adam Schiff. Thank you for coming on The Beat tonight.
My pleasure.
What does it mean that you have the DA going at charges like this after someone has just finished getting their federal sentence? Have you ever seen a case like this when you were in the office?
No, I would call this very unusual for the DA's office to follow a federal conviction or a federal acquittal for that matter. The reason generally is because New York's double jeopardy laws are very strong, and so it would be very unlikely. Also here, it's not like there was some obvious miscarriage of justice. I mean, I think here probably what DA Vance is thinking, as you've said on your earlier segments, is that in case Trump would pardon Manafort, that he'd have these charges hanging over his head.
Right, and you haven't spoken to the DA,
no.
But you worked with him for a long time. You're saying your view is he knows this is an extra step, and he may be taking it in order to deal with and counter a potential abuse of the federal pardon power.
Stressing that I don't know that directly from the DA, yes, that would be my very strongly educated guess.
When you look at actually winning a case like this against Paul Manafort under these conditions, how would you rate the likelihood of prevailing, of getting Manafort a conviction in New York?
Putting aside the double jeopardy question, which he has that as a potential defense, the case is a slam dunk.
A slam dunk?
Yeah, Manafort pled guilty to essentially these charges in federal court. He allocated to them, and he also admitted that he was guilty of the counts that hung, where the jury didn't reach a verdict. So Manafort has already admitted the underlying facts underlying these charges. So he is going to be relatively easily convictable.
You're basically saying that one of the star witnesses against Paul Manafort in the New York case is Paul Manafort.
Clearly.
And so what could he get if convicted?
The maximum is 8 1/3 to 25 years in state prison. The minimum, if he's convicted on the top count, is 1 to 3 years in state prison.
And based on your knowledge, everyone's been watching how these sentence guidelines can work or be downgraded.
Right.
What would be a reasonable outcome in New York?
You know, New York doesn't have sentencing guidelines. The judge has complete discretion as long as they don't go below a mandatory minimum or above a mandatory maximum. So, you know, a case like this, it's in the millions of dollars, so it's worth in the 2, 3, 4 year range at the low end.
How does Cy Vance look at this? Because Bob Mueller has a very different national reputation and awareness from being special counsel to beforehand. Cy Vance is not the special counsel. He's not looking at all aspects of 2016, but he is now the first person as a prosecutor outside of the federal system to take up charges against a prominent Trump aide. Does he know he's just started what might be the biggest case of his career?
Cy Vance is a very smart and very careful prosecutor, so I think that he knows this is a very important case. I don't know that he would agree that it's the most important of his career. He has lots of important cases, and I think it's a mantra in the Manhattan DA's office that Mr. Morgenthau used to say, that every case is important to the victim. So, important case for sure, but I don't think he would say to the exclusion of lots of other important cases that he has.
Interesting. Again, because you worked with Cy Vance, who everyone's learning is now picking up where Mueller left off with Paul Manafort. The last question I have to ask you is, of course, the biggest one. Do you know what it is?
I do not know what it is.
Being someone who almost ran the whole DA's office, I bet you can imagine. Paul Manafort pled out once, claimed that he was flipping, and lied to Mueller's prosecutors. He's now facing, as you just put it, potentially a longer jail sentence in New York than what he faced against Mueller, in a place where there's no pardon and he might have rougher treatment. Do you think the DA's office can flip him for real this time and get better information?
If I were a betting, look, listen, speculation can be a fool's errand. If I were a betting man, I'd say probably not. If he didn't flip under the federal charges and he violated his agreement, I would say he's unlikely to cooperate. He may well plead guilty, but he's unlikely to cooperate.
And in your experience, why do people like that resist to the end cooperation?
You know, there's a million reasons. They have their own private view of the truth. There are people they're protecting. I mean, in my experience, the biggest reason cooperating witnesses lie is not to falsely incriminate somebody. It's to falsely exculpate somebody.
Exculpate meaning to protect someone.
Absolutely.
Do they do it out of fear?
Sometimes. I don't know that they're doing that here. Obviously, we have the international connections, but that would be speculation.
International connections being that Paul
Ukraine,
Manafort may be on the
Russia,
wrong side of people around the world.
Obviously possible, but I have no knowledge of that.
As someone who worked with the DA here, who filed these new charges, Dan, I really appreciate you coming on. Will you come back on tomorrow night?
My pleasure, and I'd be happy to.
Dan Alonzo, I feel like we'll be talking to a lot of people like you as we look to where this case heads. Thank you very much. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.